black cat. For the most wild, yet the most homely narrative which I am about to tell, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. And yet tomorrow I die. And today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. Yet I will not attempt to expand them. Hereafter, perhaps some intellect will be found which will reduce my phantasms to the mere commonplace. Some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive, in the details I describe with awe, as nothing more than a very natural succession of causes and effects. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and the humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. And with these I spent a great deal of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding or caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. For those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable. There is something to be said in the unselfish, self-sacrificing love of a brute, which goes directly to the heart of him who has had, on frequent occasion, to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Noticing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity in procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a monkey, and a cat. This latter of which was a remarkably large and beautiful creature, entirely black, and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusions to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious on this matter, and I mention the point for no other reason than it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he accompanied me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty I could prevent him from following me through the streets. And our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend, had experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language with my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple about maltreating the rabbit, the monkey, or even the dog when they came either through accident or affection in my way. But my disease grew upon me. For what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto, who was becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. Returning home one night much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body in a more than fiendish malevolence. Gin-nurtured, thrilled every fiber of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush. I shudder as I retell the damnable atrocity. And when reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime in which I had been guilty. But it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into darkness and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented in its true or frightful appearance. But he no longer appeared to suffer any pain, and he went about the house as usual. But, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to at first be grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation. And then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. Of this spirit, philosophy takes no account, yet I am not more sure that my soul lives than I am, that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which gives direction to the character of man. Who has not, 100 times, found himself committing a vile or silly action for no other reason than because he knows he should not? Have we not, in the teeth of our best judgment, a perpetual inclination to violate that which is law, merely because we understand it to be such? It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning, in cool blood, I slipped a noose about the animal's neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes, and with the bitterest remorse at my heart. Hung it because I knew it had loved me, and because I knew it had given me no reason of offense. Hung it because I knew in so doing I was committing a sin, a deadly sin, that would so jeopardize my mortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most terrible and the most powerful God. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire! The curtains of my room were aflame, the whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up. And I resign myself thenceforward to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a link between the disaster and the atrocity. But I am detailing a chain of facts and wish not to leave even a single link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception could be found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. And about this wall, a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion with very minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other such expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas-relief upon the image of the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. It was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, my wonder and my terror were extreme. But at length, reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. And upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been filled by a large crowd, by someone of whom the animal must have been cut from a tree, thrown through my window, and into my chamber. This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from sleep, and the falling of the other walls compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, with the flame and the ammonia from the carcass had thus accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. Although I thus readily accounted to my conscience, if not altogether for my reasoning, for the startling facts just detailed, it did not the less fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat. And during this time, there came back into my spirit a sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the creature, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented for a similar pet of the same color and somewhat same characteristics. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object reposing upon one of the immense hogsheads of gin or of rum which constituted the chief furnitures of the apartment. I had been looking at this hogshead for some time, and what now caused me surprise was that I had not sooner noticed the object thereupon. I approached it, touched it with my hand. It was a black cat. A very large one. Fully as large as Pluto. And closely resembling him in every regard but one. Pluto had not a single portion of white hair on any part of its body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite, splotch of white covering near the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature in which I had been in search. I at once offered to purchase it off the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to depart, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When we reached the house,